Hello, and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Stay at Home Speaker Series. Today's program is Migration and Habitat Selection of Golden Eagles in North America with Laurie Maynard, PhD student at the University of Moncton in New Brunswick, Canada.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Laurie.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. My name is Jamie Dawson, and I'm the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and we are so glad that you all are joining us today. Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally around the world. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. To all of our members, thank you so much for your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, we hope that you consider becoming one in the future. Hawk Mountain hopes that everyone remains safe and healthy during these times of COVID challenges, and we are thrilled to offer our local and global community a variety of free virtual programming. As always, Hawk Mountain greatly appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on Hawk Mountain's YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website directly connecting you to our YouTube channel. At any point during today's program, viewers may submit questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. We've designated time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we are so excited that Laurie Maynard is joining us today all the way from Canada to share with us her fascinating research on golden eagles. And before we go further, I'd love to take a moment to share some of Laurie's background experience with our audience. Laurie Maynard is a PhD student at the University of Moncton in New Brunswick, Canada. Born in Quebec, she first completed a bachelor's degree in ecology at the University of Quebec in Rimouski, where she fell in love with birds. She followed her passion through a master's degree in biology at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada. During her studies, Laurie worked with multiple bird species, including gannets, sandpipers, chickadees, puffins, and her all-time favorite, gulls. For her PhD project, Laurie transitioned to birds of prey and now works on golden eagles in North America. Laurie, how did you become so interested in the field of raptor science?
Honestly, it's a bit of luck more than anything. When I started my biology degree in Rimouski, I wanted to study two things, marine ecosystem and Arctic ecosystem. So when I started being good with birds, I loved birds. I went for seabirds, and when I started my PhD, I wanted to go for more Arctic species. Golden eagles are found very high north, so it's how I became into the raptor world.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And what is your connection with Hawk Mountain Sanctuary?
Actually, I have a PhD director, co-director. So when you're doing PhD, you have a main director that supervises your work. And I work with Jean-François Terrien, who is a biologist at Hawk Mountain. So he connected me with your program, and I hope to come back and visit again so I can see my golden eagles pass.
You better come back. I have to say that was the best pronunciation of JF's name that I've ever heard. So I'm going to congratulate you. Well, wonderful. Laurie, we are all excited to hear about your golden eagle research. What could be more exciting? So I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Perfect. Well, I will share my screen for you guys and get it started. I'll just open the chat before I start. There we go. Well, thank you all for being here for my presentation. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge the contribution of the government of Quebec and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, which provided a lot of their monitoring data on golden eagles for my PhD project. And this is the data I'm going to show you today. So some from Alaska and some from Quebec, which migrate and winter in the States, so in Eastern Canada as well. So I won't tell you more because that's basically what I'm going to show you today. So when birds are moving around. They're moving for a purpose. They're moving to go feed, they're moving to breed towards their nest, or to avoid extreme conditions, such as winter, so they migrate south for better condition, warmer climate that allows them to survive throughout the winter. So since they're able to move around, they're also able to select certain prey type or habitat that they prefer. For bald eagle, for instance, they can feed on fish or small rodents, on hunting carcasses, or ducks. And all of these prey types are found in different habitats, such as aquatic or prairie-like habitat, forest, or swamp. So the bald eagle or any kind of raptor species will select the habitat that they prefer, the prey type. So most of the time, this will be a prey type that is of low cost and easy to catch. So in my example here, our eagle might select a rodent or a little rabbit in a prairie-like environment. But if we change this environment with some human disturbance, or maybe some environmental changes such as a warming climate or maybe a high precipitation, like high rainy days, maybe our eagle will change its preferred habitat and preferred prey type for another kind of prey. Obviously, I'm not studying bald eagle in my PhD project. As you know, I'm studying golden eagles, but it's pretty much the research question I'm asking myself. So first, I want to know, where do golden eagles migrate? So what are their main migration corridor, and how do they connect to their breeding ground in Canada? And also, I want to know which habitat do they choose to feed, like I introduced you, and how do wind turbines affect their individual movement? So how do this new environment, new disturbance in their environment can affect their movement? Before I go further in my question, I want to make sure I introduce my study species. So golden eagles are bird of prey, obviously, we said before. And like the bald eagle, it can feed on several prey types. For instance, they can feed on ducks, and they can feed on little grouse or ptarmigan in the north. They can feed on small rodent in the west. They're known to feed on jackrabbit a lot. And they're also known to go from hunting carcasses when the hunting season is over, so they can feed on moose or deer carcasses that are left in their territory. Someone said that rabbit are lagomorphs, not rodent. Obviously, I'm sorry, my biology on mammals is very far away from me. I haven't studied that for a while, but thank you. Bald eagles are also here. I forgot to change the name, but this is golden eagles. I should not aigle royal, which is in French, but they like open habitat. They are associated with open habitat. So obviously, when we see high density forests, we don't expect golden eagles. That's a characteristic that we see a lot in the scientific literature. So in the science fields. And what we have in North America that is open habitats that we know of, we have mountain ranges. Most of the time it's the summit that is really open. The tundra in the northern part of Canada and in Alaska, there are some very wide landscape of tundra that's mostly lichen and moss. We also have prairies in central North America, and in the southwest we have deserts that can have golden eagles that live there. But my main habitats that I will talk about today are the tundra in the north and the mountains, because I study golden eagles mostly in the north. So we don't have prairies in eastern Canada. or in Alaska, and the desert are mostly in the south. So I will mostly talk about the two main habitats first. So throughout my presentation, I have those little quiz for the public. You can answer in the chat or maybe to yourself. So it's just to make it a little bit more interactive and to see what's your general knowledge of golden eagles or raptors. So here is my first question is, of these two birds, which is the female? And to give you a cue, because the photos might be a little different, is the bee is smaller. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to answer. If you want, like I said, in the little chat box in Zoom, you can answer there if you want. Yeah, I had a few answers coming in. And it seems like most people have the right answer. So the answer is A. Yes, indeed, females are larger than males. This is for several reasons that we can think of. It's not proven really, but the main hypothesis behind that is because the female and the male will share the same territory when they're going to breed. So if they don't want to compete for the same food within the same territory, they need to be different in morphology. So here, by being larger, the female can hunt bigger prey, whereas the male, by being a little smaller, can hunt faster and smaller prey. And in addition to that, the female will stay very long in the nest during the breeding season. So she will stay in the nest throughout the incubation, and a few weeks after the chick hatch, so she can feed the chicks and stay with the chick if there is predators or maybe extreme weather events. So she needs to protect it. And the male will need to feed the female, the chick, and himself throughout those weeks. So by being smaller, it is thought that it can catch more prey more efficiently, even though those prey might be a little smaller, but being more agile can catch faster prey as well. So it can feed the female and its chick throughout the breeding season. So with those two reasons, it kind of explains why there is different in size, but it also affects the movement. So the female will stay stranded at the nest for several weeks, whereas the male during the breeding season will hunt around and will be the main provider of food for the family. Golden eagles are found worldwide, but I'm studying mostly in North America. So let's zoom on that. In North America, we have two main populations, the Western and the Eastern population. The main difference is the number of individuals. In the West, they are way larger in population size than the Eastern population, which makes most studies taking place in the West because the density of golden eagles is higher, so it's easier to capture. But by being smaller in the Eastern population, we have to protect it because it's a smaller population and it's more vulnerable to if it starts to decline. Another difference is that in the Western population, we have individuals that we called residents, meaning that they stay in the same territory pretty much year-long. So they will not migrate, and when they find a nest, they often stay within this territory and protect it year-round, so they don't really move much outside of this territory throughout their life, basically. Whereas the Eastern population mostly have or is considered completely migratory. So all the individuals of the population are expected to migrate south in Pennsylvania or Kentucky or West Virginia and winter there until the next breeding season. So if I go back to my first questions, where do golden eagles migrate, I'm asking this question because we do know that there is a main migration corridor in the Appalachian Mountains, and that it connects basically the Gaspésie region here and the wintering ground. But we still don't know, and oh yeah, Hawk Mountain Sanctuary falls right within this migration corridor, and that's why we know this migration corridor, because of all those stations where we can count the birds that fly over the mountains and be able to estimate how many birds a year migrates there or winter there. So this is how we know this migration corridor, but we don't know what other migration corridor can connect those breeding areas in the north and maybe over here with the main region where they winter. So by being able to follow their movement, we'll be able to really connect the location where they breed and the location where they winter, and know all the potential migration corridor for golden eagles in eastern North America. Golden eagles, like I said, in eastern North America have a really small population, and even in the west, they are threatened by many disturbance, by human disturbance. For instance, in eastern Canada, there are windmills, not only in the breeding region, but also in their migration corridor. Wind turbines that are developing a lot because of its green energy, and people want to turn into greener development, but that can limit the habitat available for golden eagles. There's also some mine development in the north, and both of these threats creates other threats, such as the built roads where we can have higher collision risk with trucks or cars. They build electricity transport line where the eagles can be tangled or electrocuted. It is a big threat in some region of the world for golden eagles. And it creates less habitat available, like I said, for the wind turbines. So we reduce the availability of good habitat for hunting for golden eagles. So in North America, in the eastern population, I just wanted to show that it is a conservation concern for many states and provinces in Canada and the United States, because they have a status, so they are considered endangered or vulnerable in many states. So we need to protect the golden eagles from these threats, since it's a very small population, and if it starts to decline, it could be very bad for the population. So I want to go back quickly to my research question, because what ties those research questions together is that I need movement data. So I need to be able to follow one individual throughout its year of migration and breeding. And to do that, we have loggers, or little loggers that allow us to follow the birds, pretty much like a run watch, like a GPS watch. So a GPS watch, what do is they allow to connect with the satellite and be able to track your movement by pinpointing your location with the satellite. We do the same for golden eagles. It's just not a watch, it's a brown box like you see in this picture. We have some additional features, such as solar panel here that allows the battery to recharge, and the giant antenna that allows us to download the data remotely without having to retrieve the logger. And the rope that you see here is how we attach to the golden eagle. We basically put the harness around its body, much like a backpack, and it doesn't make his movement less possible, so he can fly pretty easily, and just like he didn't have the backpack on. So we don't really disturb the bird, and so it can continue to do its movement like it didn't have any backpack, but we can still follow his movement because it does have the backpack. So we have several capture locations. I'm showing only the ones by the government of Quebec that were mainly in the Gaspésie region, but also in the north, because it's really two different subpopulation almost. And I joined the team of the government of Quebec in the north. So I'm going to show you a bit of those pictures and how we capture golden eagle in a northern environment. So first you have to land in the biggest city in the north. So this was one of the biggest city there. It's pretty small, but it's convenient for such a study because we have access to helicopters that can take us to the main places where the golden eagle nests. So we fly around the beautiful northern landscape, trying to find some eagle nests, mostly on cliffs, because there's not much trees to nest on. And here comes my second question. This is a picture. There is a golden eagle nest. And if you can find it, you can put it in the chat box in which section we can find the golden eagle. So I'm going to let you try to find it in this picture. To give you a little story, I couldn't find the eagle nest at all, so I just took the picture and hoped that the bird was on the picture, and indeed it was when I looked at it later. So it's not easy. The trick to find a golden eagle nest is to look at the orange spot on the cliffs. The orange spot are actually lichen that loves the poop from the bird, so the guano. It gives nutrient to the lichen, and the lichen grows a lot around nests or perch site from birds. So indeed, it was in section A for you guys that got it. And it's also the section with the most orange patch around the nest. And you can see if you close up a bit, you can see that there's actually a little white spot that is a chick, and this is the head, and this is the tail of the female guarding the chick on the nest. So when we go out to catch eagle, we want to find breeders. So we want to find active nests with an egg or a chick. And you can see there's a lot of orange around the nest, like I said. And once we find a nest that is active, we try to find a nice spot to land the helicopter. And we start walking around the landscape, trying to find a good spot out of view of the nest to put the trap. And maybe you've noticed, now that I've talked about orange lichen, that we have a little friend over here. It's not a good picture, but it's a peregrine falcon. So we do have some other raptor species that nest around within the same territory of a golden eagle. So this was maybe 200 meters away from the eagle nest. And this is not good news for us biologists usually, because the eagle, when it comes back to the nest, is being attacked by the falcon. So the falcon usually swoops the eagle until it goes away, but the nest is within the falcon territory. So the eagle usually don't see our trap or a bait. It's not attracted to it, so it just flies in and out of its nest in minutes because it wants to avoid the falcon. But despite the falcon, we sometimes still try to catch our eagle. We never know if it sees the bait. It might go for it even though the falcon is around. And this is one of the traps. It's called a bow net. It basically opens over the eagle once it's landed within the trap. We also have what we call a gun net. It basically deploys over the eagle. It doesn't deploy on the eagle, so the net will deploy very high and fall over the eagle before it has time to fly away. And once we are done setting the trap, we are not done setting our whole thing because we need to hide somewhere. So we put hide hunting tents, some very close to the trap so we can get to the eagle as fast as possible when we catch it, and some very far away that we are able to have a good look at the nest. And whenever an eagle comes in the nest or comes near the trap, so we can trigger at the right time, because an eagle hunting goes really fast and it's a matter of seconds if you want to catch an eagle. And we wait in those tents for several hours, most of the time 8 hours a day, with those beautiful mosquitoes, little friend that would gather in the windows, or sometimes we don't really have a view of anything. Hiding 8 hours in that, it's pretty long. Sometimes it gets really cold, so you have to improvise a bit. But when we are lucky, we catch an eagle, and it's really fast. We don't have time to take picture of an eagle trap, obviously, because we have to get to it as fast as possible. We have to get it out of the trap. We put a little hood over its head so it stays calm. We also wrap the feet around in vet wrapping so it doesn't hurt us, because there's pretty big feet with really pointy claws. And we start measuring. We take measures such as wing length, the length of the claw, and we also have our little mosquito friends that continues to bite us all along, so we have to be as quick as possible. And we also take sex and age. Sex is with the size, like I said, females are larger, so it's easier to differentiate. But we can also tell how old is the eagle in sometimes. So when we catch an eagle that we can tell the age, we try to age it. So this is my third question. If you're a good birder out there for raptor species and you know your golden eagles, maybe you're able to estimate the age of this eagle. This is one of the hardest questions I have, I think, if you're not familiar. If you have the answer, you can share it on the chat. If not, I'll just tell it in a few seconds. So I got a few answers there. I had 3 years, 4 or 5 years. Don't know if someone else wants to try before I give the answer away. No, so actually this bird could be either, oh, someone had the right answer, juvenile. It could be a juvenile or over a year old. We knew this bird was over a year old because we were in the middle of the breeding season, so we knew it hatched at least in June, and we were in July. But juveniles have a lot of white like this, so we could say it's under 2 years. That would be our best estimate of the age of this bird. And the white on the tail, there's also white on under the wings that we could have seen, but the tail is our best estimate here. And we knew there that by this much white, when it gets older, it loses a lot of white in the tail. And by 4 to 5 years, it actually gets all brown, and the golden eagle doesn't have white patches anywhere. So by 4 years, we consider the bird to be an adult and ready to breed. This bird was not ready to breed, so it was not a bird that was nesting nearby. We were lucky to catch a bird that was passing by and saw our trap and got attracted to it. It's still very interesting to see how these birds move around. So we did put a logger on this bird. There you go. As a backpack, like you can see, it just holds in the back. And here it's a video, so I'm just gonna turn off my camera so it's easier for everyone to see. If you have other things streaming, you might want to pause them if you really want to see the video. Otherwise, it should be clearer on the YouTube video when Hog Mountain's going to post it on its channel. Basically, to show you that it can fly very easily away. If it's a good quality on your part, you might see that there's still a lot of mosquitoes harassing us. That's what it is in the north. It's just clouds of mosquitoes everywhere, so you just don't want to stay out too long. And there you go, our birds fly off. And from that point, we never see the bird again, or we don't want to see the bird again. It's gonna remotely download the data, the logger. We can remotely download the data, so we don't need to catch the eagle again. And at some point, the logger is gonna fall off because the rope is not that good. At some point, it falls off during the life of the eagle, but we can get some movement data for quite a lot of years. And here we have an eagle with one logger flying happily around. And this is also a young. As you can see, there's a lot of white on the tail. So this is an idea of certain individuals that I have in my study, and this might be a little hard to read, but what I mainly want to show you is that some individual, we have less than 2 weeks of data. So either the logger failed to work, or fell off in under a year of data. So this, I cannot use this individual. We don't even have a complete migration track. So unfortunately, this is not really interesting data, but we do have really good data that lasted, some loggers lasted more than 8 years long. So we have 8 migration, 8 breeding seasons. It's continuous data. So 8 long years on the same individual. And in biology, and for the question I'm asking, it's really interesting because we can see the behavior of the golden eagle with some environmental change, such as the wind turbine, like I'm going to show you later, or maybe different condition during migration. We also have some subadults, so under 4 years old, like I mentioned before. And these are important to take apart or account in some questions because they have very different movement. Since they don't have a nest to stay on, they wander around some regions, and they wander a lot more than, for instance, this male that had a nest clearly somewhere around here and was staying within its territory, whereas the female would simply, subadult female would simply go around anywhere she wants, probably looking for a future nesting territory or looking what's going to be available in a few years when she's going to be ready to breed herself. So I'm finally going to start answering some of my research questions for you guys. Thank you for your patience. And so my first question, where do they migrate? I want to connect the breeding region with the wintering region. And here I have some data from Alaska that I compared with the individual in the eastern population. And the main things that I take out of that is that in Alaska, they have a really narrow breeding region, or the density is a lot higher. We have a lot more individual. But when you look at the wintering location, they are all over the place. The distribution is very large. When you look at the eastern population, it's the opposite. You have a larger breeding distribution for approximately the same number of individuals, but a more narrow, not that narrow, but still a smaller gradient of wintering distribution. So probably it's a density thing. So the fact that there's more individual, easier access, they have to range wider during the wintering region. There are some golden eagles all over, nesting all over Rockies as well. So in order to not compete with too many individuals, probably have to scatter on a larger scale in Alaska than the eastern population that can stay within a narrow range without competing against each other. Let's take a closer look at Eastern Canada. So when we connect the dots between breeding and wintering region, we can see that the tracks are really dense in the Appalachian Mountains. So we knew that corridor was used and it was an important corridor for golden eagles, but now we can also say that with this data. But now we can see other kind of corridors. So we have a smaller one here along the coast. It's mostly one individual that we track for 5 years, but the second individual here seems to follow the same path. So this is good news. This could be a potential migration corridor for individual nesting in that region. And for the northern one, they seem to be a little bit all over the place. We don't have a lot of individual and they all have their different tracks from each other. This is the Canadian Shield. This is very flat land, so probably they don't really have any mountains to help them take altitude or to follow for their migration. So they just goes on a straight line towards the coast, and they seem to join these individual in the North Shore and then join everyone on the main Appalachian migration corridor. And most of the golden eagles will actually winter in that migration corridor. So this is why we see such a dense number of tracks. It seems that all the individual from this population goes in that region during the winter. So this is showing that this part of North America or Eastern North America is really important for the eastern population of golden eagles. Although I say all of that, we do have some individuals that do completely different things. They actually winter near the Great Lakes. It's not on the shore of the Great Lakes, but it's in that region. So we do have a part of the population that do not winter in the Appalachian Mountains. So it's important to take that into account for conservation as well. But since it's not the main population, we can still say that the Appalachian Mountain is the main region of importance for this population. Now this is a little blurry, so I'm gonna zoom in right away. What I wanna show you here is the wintering latitude. So this is the point is where the bird stops to winter when it's stopped with migration. And you can see different things. You see how most individual, for example, the green here, have specific regions they go to each year. These birds love this spot in Vermont and seems to go back every year within the same maybe 100-kilometer range for wintering. And other individuals, maybe you see the pink also loves Pennsylvania and this little spot near Hog Mountain, actually, probably. So maybe some of you that goes to Hog Mountain have seen this bird. But we also have individual that goes everywhere. So this bird on 4 winters, there's 2 winters in Pennsylvania, but the other 2 winters were in New York or New Hampshire. And we also have winters on the breeding ground. So this bird did not migrate for 5 different winters. So some years, apparently conditions were good enough that the birds decided to stay within its nesting territory. This is interesting because I first said in my presentation that the eastern population was completely migratory, but we found that some individual, or at least one of them, is actually switching strategy from resident and migratory. So we probably have more individual in the population that stays in the winter in their breeding region that we don't know about. So this is a new thing for the eastern population. And it also means that breeding region will become more important if there's a warming climate. So conditions going to be better and better year to year. So golden eagles will likely stay there more winters, and there's going to be more and more resident within our population. So this region is going to become more important, and we might need to protect it better. And to protect it better, we have to know which habitat is preferred for golden eagles. So what habitat we need to protect so we help the population. Excuse me. So here in the Gaspésie region in Quebec, we have some open habitat. Like I said, golden eagles seem to like open habitat, but it's really scarce. It's not really available as much. So we have some mountain range, what we call the Mont Albert, and some forestry industries that cut some forest there in that region. We do have some farming near the coast, but this golden eagles are not really seen in those habitats, although it's considered an open habitat, but in that region, they're not really observed. So I don't expect them to use it, but it's still available as an open habitat. And since it's mainly forest in that region, they do exactly that. They use the forest as a foraging ground. Even though we associate golden eagles with open habitats, in that region, they don't seem to care. For instance, the female Charlie don't even have open habitat available near her region or her territory and just hunt in the forest. So what do they hunt in the forest? We don't know yet, but it's still interesting to see that they can thrive in a forest environment in their breeding region. If we look up north, we have more open habitat available. The tundra is actually very available, and we have many individuals that seems to love this kind of habitat. And actually, if you zoom in on these individuals that are in the transition between tundra and boreal forest, you can see that they don't even go towards boreal forest, they go straight north towards the tundra. They don't cross the river unless they're migrating, or maybe on some occasion to perch, or maybe they try to hunt and see it's not successful, so go back into tundra. So these individuals, even though they have high vegetation, if they have the choice between high vegetation and tundra, they seem to go for the tundra. Whereas in the south, there's not much of an open habitat available, so they go directly for what's available, which is the forest. And actually, if you go to their wintering range, so here we're in Pennsylvania, and Hawk Mountain Sanctuary is right there. It's mainly farming, so agriculture or forest that is available, a bit like we have in Gaspésie region in the south. And if you close up on this individual, Rosie, even though it's a subadult, she spends most of her breeding time, she started breeding a year ago in the north. Even as a subadult, she would spend all of her time in the tundra, but when she's in our wintering ground, she spends all of her time in the forest. She doesn't seem to care much for whatever's agriculture in a beige color here, yellowish. So in the winter region, all the golden eagles, even though they come from the north or the south, seem to enjoy the forest. If we compare to Alaska, I'm only going to show the breeding region. It's pretty much like the tundra region. So you have really open shrublands and some rocky lands around the mountain. And they seem to use that. Even though they have a swamp here available, this female seems to go there once in a while, but they mainly go in this green, dark green color, which is the shrubland, and some of the ranges in the brown that is barren land. So it seems like when they have the choice between open and forest habitat, they will go for it. But if they don't have the choice between the two, they will go for whatever's available, like the forest. And finally, I'm going to show you some of my latest data on winter vines. So I don't have much to show, but I do have the tracks and the winter vines in the map here in the breeding region. And it mainly shows that most of the wind turbines are not really within range of the golden eagles, except for one individual here. And it doesn't seem to bother that much. Well, it doesn't avoid the wind turbines. It goes within the site where there's wind turbines, and it's not dead yet, or it's not injured. So we assume that it's doing okay and that the turbines don't really have a high negative impact on its breeding so far. And if you look at another individual, it's not showed in the previous map, but we have data for this individual from 2009 to 2017. So even before there was a lot of wind turbines in the region. And again, I'm going to go very fast. This is basically its territory, the yellow colors here. It's what we call the home range. So this is its territory that it uses throughout the summer. And you can see from year to year that it goes to wind turbine sites. So it's nesting really close to those wind turbines and doesn't change or avoid these wind turbines in its territory. So it uses these sites even though there is wind turbines within range. So it leads us to the question, are they on a smaller scale avoiding the wind turbines? For instance, are they flying over it? Or do they use it as a feeding ground? So this is the next question I'm going to try to answer for my research project. So today I showed you many things. I showed you that the Appalachian are really an important region for migration and wintering. But we also saw that maybe there will be a decrease in migratory individual with a warmer climate induced by climate change. So maybe the breeding region will become more important and we'll need to adjust conservation measure accordingly. We also saw that eagles use tundra or the forest for feeding, depending on the region. So it thus leads to my question, is open habitat really a preferred habitat, or is it just when it's available, they will go for it, but when it's not available, they can still thrive in forest habitat? So more question and more results that I hope to get with this question. And finally, we saw that wind turbine development does not seem to affect the home range of golden eagles. They pretty much keep the same home range. But we don't know if they avoid the wind turbines with altitude, which will create negative impact by creating habitat fragmentation, because they're avoiding these regions. These sites are not available for feeding anymore. So this creates lesser hunting habitat available. Or maybe do they use those wind turbine sites as a feeding ground, because we pretty much cut down the forest to get those wind turbines up the hill. But that could be also very bad or have a negative impact because it increased the collision risk. But since we have no collision known in the breeding area or these regions that I showed you, it's likely that they avoid the wind turbines with other measures such as altitudes, by taking more altitude, or by swooping or flying around the wind turbines, but very close, that we'd still see them within their home range. There's a lot of questions to answer with that, and I hope to get more answer to show at some point. But the good news overall is that the conservation measures that are in place right now seem to have a good impact, even though the population is still very small. It seems to be increasing since the late 70s and even more the late 80s. Well, because at Hawk Mountain, there are more and more sightings of golden eagles. So this is a good news. And if we continue to protect these these good important regions for golden eagles will get to a population size that is enough to be stable and to adapt if there is more and more disturbance for golden eagles. So I would like to thank you for listening, and I will be open for questions.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Great job on your presentation. That was fascinating. And we do have some questions. There were a few people who wrote in to ask who gets to name the birds. I think we all took notice of Pepe Le Pew and Mr. Wiggle.
It's the biologist. So I got to name one, which wasn't presented, but I guess that everyone has their preference or something that they want to share, and they choose a name for the bird. So
what name did you choose for the bird you named?
I named her, it was a female, I named her Astrid, more of a Scandinavian. There's a lot of golden eagle in Scandinavia, so.
Nice, nice. Okay, we have a bunch of questions. They're coming in. Do immatures return to the north during the summer?
Do what?
Immatures? Immature?
Yes. Yes, they do. One of them I can show it on the screen. Let me just put it back on. There you go. The white one here migrated several times in the south, but every summer she went back to the north and spent all, like you can see, she doesn't have a nest, although she does prefer some region. She goes wherever she wants.
All right, thank you. So another question is, in general, how long do golden eagles live?
Oh, I don't really know that question. I know it's probably at least 2 decades, but it's a long-lived species. So usually in birds, it's about from 2 to 3 decades when we say that, but it's something I would need to check. So maybe you want to check yourself.
We'll look into it. We'll look into it.
Yeah.
So during the winter, when it appears that golden eagles might be near the coast, are they eating fish?
They could be. They actually use a lot of those rivers in the someplace in the region, breeding region. It creates topography, so they probably perch on a cliff, have a good view of the river, and probably eat either fish or ducks in these areas. So it's possible, although it's not really common in golden eagles' diet to see fish.
Okay. Do you use eBird data in your research?
I don't, but I wish I did. I was trying to get another question using eBird to estimate the population size of the eastern population. We don't really know the exact numbers, so eBird could have been a good use of that, but I'm not there yet, so maybe not.
Okay, so another question. Were golden eagles impacted by DDT like the bald eagles?
Yeah, they were, definitely. We don't really know the exact impact, but we do know that it created a decline at some point. But since we don't really know the size of the population before DDT, we can't say the exact effect. Yeah.
That's why our long-term population counts or migration counts are so important to have that baseline data for populations. And on that note, with golden eagles, do you know, Laurie, if lead toxicity is a big problem for the populations you study?
Yes, I did cut that part from the presentation. I had it before. But yeah, lead is we do take lead data from each capture. We take blood sample to calculate the lead. And we did have one bird that died of lead intoxication. And most especially in the Gaspésie region, the south part, there is a lot of hunting in that region. And when we catch the eagle, even in the spring, we can see a lot of lead in their blood, which is pretty bad for those birds. They can't, usually it changes their behavior and their ability to fly around.
Yes, yes. Oh. Okay, another question. Thank you for that answer, by the way. Have you done any falconry with the Goldens?
No, there is a wildlife refuge where they have a golden eagle in captivity that can't fly. They don't know why. It was actually part of it had a logger before, so we did see its movement before, but they can't do much falconry because it's easy to get if the birds try to fly and you hold too hard to it, it can just look at your shoulder. So usually they don't do it. But I know some Inuit communities, some Aboriginal communities in the north, they do some falconry a bit with the eagles. I know it's also common in Russia, I think.
Thank you. Okay. Do your tracking devices have a release mechanism? How does it work and after how long?
They don't have a release mechanism. The rope is not meant to last forever. We are really impressed that it can last 10 years, but 10 years can be very long for a bird, obviously. So most of them don't last much more than 3 to 5 years. So the rope gets damaged and eventually the logger falls off.
So those birds that you had 8 and 9 years worth of data, that's a real treasure there.
Yeah, exactly.
And the questions are coming in. There's a lot. What do wintering eagles eat in the Appalachians in the winter season?
I don't think we know much in the Appalachian. I was told that they kind of swoop like, I forgot the English name for that bird. They swoop around the tree, so they probably catch small mammals in the ground or birds that are flying underground. They're not birds that are gonna catch birds while they fly like a falcon, but they catch everything underground. So I would bet small mammals and birds.
Or possibly a carcass that they would find, right?
Yeah, if they're hunting in the region for sure during the winter, whatever they can find, they're really big scavengers. They're known to scavenge on a lot of whatever's dead.
Are there towns in particular in the west or east that there'd be a good chance of seeing a golden eagle?
In the east, I'd say if you go to Hawk Mountain during the migration, you're probably going to see one. In the west, there's a lot of places you can see. I know if you go anywhere in the Rockies, or if you go in the prairie, a town specifically, I know Boise, Idaho is probably a good place in the west to see golden eagles. But if you really want to see one, there's a lot more in the west. So go in the west. If you want to see one in the east, I think Hawk Mountain is one of the best places, or any observation station in the Appalachian.
Thank you. And you heard it from Laurie. Come to Hawk Mountain. Okay, and I think this might be one of our last questions. Are you familiar with Trish Miller's research?
Yes, I didn't present it here. I didn't have time, but she does collaborate with me. And I have some data from the States that are from her and all of her collaborators in the wildlife government. Yeah.
Wonderful. I wonder everyone working in the field of golden eagles is probably pretty well connected, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's not a lot in the east, so whatever data you can get.
Wonderful. Well, that wraps it up for the questions. Laurie, much gratitude to you for sharing your time with us and your passion and your research. It truly was fascinating, and so many great questions from the audience. Thank you to our viewers for joining us. It means the world to us. We hope everyone has a fantastic holiday weekend, and we hope to see you soon. Our trails are open at Hawk Mountain. And as always, we have many more virtual programs coming your way soon. And this is the lineup for the next week. Next Wednesday, July 8th, we have Pennsylvania Mammals with Dan Lynch of the Pennsylvania Game Commission at 1:00 p.m. Next Thursday, July 9th, we have Sanctuary Storytime, A Color of His Own, and that's at 11 a.m. And then next Friday, July 10th, we have Support Your Local Pollinator, and that's at 4:00 p.m. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again, Laurie, for a fantastic presentation, and we hope to see everyone again soon. Happy 4th of July.